The separation of corporation and state must also be interpreted literally. What I mean here is that the people in government and the people in the corporate world must be different people. They cannot rotate through positions in government and then positions in the corporate world and back and forth. It's called the revolving door. It's very important that this whole process stops. Think about a separation between church and state. We would frown upon officials who went into government and then took up high executive positions within a church, and then went back to government and enacted policies that favored the church, and then went back to the church, worked in the church, and back and forth, and while in government made policies that benefited the church at the expense of other religions or non-religious people. This would be a horrible situation, and we, thankfully, have stopped this, although it used to take place. The partnership between churches and government used to be quite strong, to the extent that the church would ordain the kings. The church and the crown were often the two pillars of society, of political power. And these days, that's not true anymore in our secular societies, thankfully. The new problem that is kind of parallel to that is the partnership or combination of the corporate world and government. Corporations now dictate who our leaders are through campaign finance primarily, but of course through many, many other mechanisms. One of those is this revolving door situation, where government officials will go and work for a corporation, or the corporation will use the personal networks of that politician to help with lobbying. Corporations may hire ex-government employees that used to regulate the industry because now they have insider knowledge about how to skirt those regulations or how to get around them or how to advantage the private interests of the corporation. At worst, the revolving door works something like this. A corporation will take one of its employees, usually one of the high-up executives. They will get a job in government in a regulatory agency that is in charge of regulating that company's industry. That corporate employee, who now no longer officially works for the corporation, goes off, works in government, has some regulations passed that might be watered down, might be weaker, or might advantage the industry in some way. And when their term in government is over, they go back to the corporate world and are given a very good job, very high-paying job, as sort of a reward for doing the work they did while in government. Now, this happens all the time and it is disgraceful. But you have to think about the individuals doing it. If you're able to do this and make lots of money from your salary and then go make a lot of money in the private world while owning shares, for example, in the corporations you're regulating, and then go back to that corporation and work for an even higher salary as a reward, who wouldn't do that? That's in each individual's personal interest. So it's understandable that this happens. But there needs to be constitutional level laws blocking it from happening, and serious wealth and income tested punishments or fines for doing it that need to escalate the same way that we talked about in the previous video about escalating fines for attempting to donate money to political parties, and that there was going to be 3 strikes and then you're out and all your wealth and income's gone. We need that kind of punishment for the revolving door problem. The division between government and corporations needs to be absolute. In a previous video, we talked about advisory bodies, and so if a corporation wants to have its concerns voiced, it can use these advisory bodies to publicly let the government know about its grievances, about its challenges, about industry issues, and it's up to the government to choose to do that. We must not allow the same individuals to go back and forth between the corporate world and government, because it's a massive conflict of interest. Corporations hire ex-government employees because of their social networks and the relationships that they can leverage for lobbying those people that are still in government. It is incredibly important that the people in government are not able to find employment in the industry that they regulated while they were in government. This must absolutely not be permitted. There must be constitutional level blockages to such a conflict of interest occurring. The protections preventing a revolving door between corporations and state need to be embedded in the Constitution. We do not want a situation where a corporate-friendly political party wins and dismantles the protections. They need to be enacted in the Constitution in such a way that they are very hard to change. Probably we want to have the requirement of a supermajority, so that's at least 2/3 of the population supporting it. And the question of these constitutional amendments must always be handled individually without being packaged with any other kind of concern. The reason that is so important is that if there are, and when there are crises, we cannot allow constitutional amendments to be pushed through when they're packaged with other things that help alleviate the crisis. This is a way of pushing through legislation that's unpopular by combining it with legislation that is sort of necessary because there's a crisis. So the constitutional protections for public financing, corporate donation bans, and preventing a revolving door between government and corporations, all those things need to be constitutionally protected with requiring a supermajority and required to be handled as individual issues and never packaged with any other law or change. Another aspect that needs to happen is we need to change our education curriculum to teach about the importance of the separation between corporation and state. This means we need to teach about not only preventing a revolving door between government and corporations, but we also need to teach in our education systems the importance of public financing of elections. We need to teach why it's so important that corporate donations and support for political parties needs to be absolutely banned. We need to teach why individual donations should be banned and why self-funding political parties and campaigns should not be allowed. All of these things are to protect our democracies from being taken over by corporate wealthy interests. If we don't do this, the situation will just over time, and it will take a long time, but we're seeing it now, will just get worse and worse and worse. So if we don't change the Constitution to have these changes, and we don't also embed things in the education system, we will end up right now where we are again. So we have to change our education system to teach of the necessity of a separation of corporation and state and how to keep that in place. By changing the education system, we change the culture and ensure that the culture doesn't get manipulated back to thinking it might be a good idea to let corporations have more power. Because you can be assured that that pressure will never go away. Private interests will always want to try and manipulate public decision-making for their advantage. This is just human nature in a way, and if we allow it to happen, it will happen. So we need constitutional protections. We need an education system that consistently reinforces the need for those constitutional changes. And we need to consistently teach future generations about the importance of a separation of corporation and state. A final consideration is that public financing must be indexed to inflation. Our fines and penalties can be denominated as percentages of median income or percentage of wealth. And this means they will automatically be adjusted for inflation because they are a percentage of someone's wealth or someone's income. But the money that goes to political parties needs to be indexed to inflation so that the money political parties receive is enough to ensure that they maintain effectiveness as organizations. If we don't index to inflation, the money that political parties get will gradually become insufficient for maintaining, and then there will be enormous pressure either to get rid of the laws that ban donations, or our political parties will become ineffective, and this will mean our political system will be weakened, and this will leave it vulnerable. So public financing needs to be indexed to inflation. Our penalties need to be percentages of wealth or income, and the penalties need to be escalating in the sense that each successive offense needs to double the penalty amount. If we do all these things, it's not perfect and there still will be problems, but these solutions outlined in this video and the previous videos are a really powerful start to taking back our democratic systems so that they serve the interests of the majority and not the interests of the few and wealthy, powerful corporations and those who own them.